It started as a routine night sky scan. Nothing unusual, nothing worthy of attention. At least, that's what every automated system believed at first. The observatory feeds were calm. Star maps aligned perfectly. Satellite telemetry showed stable readings across every monitored sector of deep space. For humanity, it was just another ordinary night of watching an infinite universe that never seemed to answer back. Then the sky miscounted itself. A section of space, somewhere beyond the Kuiper belt, failed to render correctly on multiple independent systems. At first, engineers assumed a calibration error, a corrupted sensor packet, a temporary data lag. But then the anomaly persisted. Stars didn't just flicker, they vanished from every feed at once. 3 observatories on different continents flagged the same issue within seconds. Automatic cross-verification systems ran diagnostics. Nothing explained it. And then the distortion moved. Not like a ship, not like an asteroid, not like anything that obeyed momentum or physics. It was more like a missing piece of reality sliding sideways. Dr. Alara Voss was among the first humans to see it directly. Her screen auto-updated as new data flooded in, each layer more impossible than the last. She leaned closer, expecting the system to correct itself. It didn't. Instead, the black gap in space expanded slightly, and something within it shifted. A shape emerged, not fully formed, not fully visible. It was too large for any standard astronomical reference frame. The system struggled to scale it properly, repeatedly crashing and recalculating distances. Finally, a warning flashed across every connected terminal. Object EXCDS mapping PARAMETRS. Ilara felt her throat tighten. Rerun size estimation, she ordered. The AI complied. The result came back slower than usual, as if the system itself hesitated to deliver the answer. Diameter estimate, planetary scale. A silence fell over the control room, not the kind caused by confusion, but the kind that arrives when human instinct realizes it has no language for what it is seeing. Because planets don't move. Planets don't arrive. And planets certainly don't appear in orbit-like formation around nothing. But this wasn't a planet. It was structured, artificial, impossible. Then it shifted again. A second mass emerged from the same region of space, aligning itself a precise distance away from the first. The spacing between them was mathematical, too perfect to be natural, too deliberate to be random. Ilara's hands hovered over her console. "Is this debris clustering?" someone whispered behind her. "No," she said quietly. "Debris doesn't form geometry." More shapes began to appear. One, then another, then 5. Each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. Each one silent. Each one emerging from the same impossible distortion, as if space itself was opening a door too large for comprehension. And then the realization hit all at once across every monitoring station on Earth. They weren't entering the system. They were revealing themselves inside it, as if they had already been there. Waiting. Ilara zoomed out the sector map. The system auto-scaled desperately, trying to keep up with the expanding number of objects. But no matter how far she zoomed, the edges of the structures still didn't fully fit on screen. It was like looking at something that refused to be contained by perspective. A junior analyst stumbled backward. "This can't be real. This violates orbital mechanics, mass displacement limits, everything." "Stop talking," Ilara interrupted softly. Because something worse was happening now. The background stars behind the structures were changing. Not moving. Not shifting. Being obscured. Like something vast was slowly blocking the universe itself from view. Then the first signal arrived. It wasn't a transmission in any known frequency. It wasn't radio, light, or quantum burst. It was perception itself. Every screen connected to the observatory flickered at once. Emergency systems tried to isolate the interference, but failed instantly. And across every display, every monitor, every satellite feed on Earth, a single symbol appeared. Not drawn, not rendered, imprinted into understanding. No one needed translation. No one needed explanation, because the meaning arrived already fully formed in the human mind. One word: witness. Ilara felt her pulse slow, not from calm, but from the instinctive realization that something far beyond human scale had just acknowledged Earth's existence. Outside the observatory, alarms began to sound across global networks. Governments scrambled for confirmation. Military channels lit up with urgent escalation orders. But inside the control room, no one moved, because all of them were staring at the sky feed. And in that feed, the structures were no longer emerging. They were settling, forming a ring, a perfect, deliberate circle around Earth. Like a cage, or a lens, or an audience taking its seats. And in the silence that followed, Ilara noticed something no system had yet flagged. A small distortion at the edge of the solar system. Something else was coming. Fast. And it was heading straight toward them. By the time Earth's rotation brought daylight across half the planet, denial had already collapsed. The sky was no longer something humanity shared. It was something being observed. From above. From everywhere. The 27 structures were now fully visible, locked into a perfect orbital formation that defied every known gravitational model. Each one was larger than a planet, yet none cast a conventional shadow. Instead, they warped light around themselves, bending starlight like glass in deep water. Satellites attempting to approach simply stopped responding. Not destroyed, not jammed. Just quieted, as if the closer they got, the less they mattered. Dr. Ilara Voss stood inside the Ares Deep Observatory Control Center, staring at cascading global feeds. Emergency protocols were no longer escalating, they were stalling. Even automated defense systems struggled to classify what they were seeing. One military analyst spoke into the channel, voice tight. "We are reading 27 unidentified megastructures in stable orbit. No propulsion signatures, no entry burns, no detectable origin vector." A pause. Then more quietly, "They didn't come from anywhere we can track." Ilara didn't respond immediately. Her eyes were fixed on the orbital map. The spacing between the structures wasn't random. It followed repeating ratios, distances that resembled wave interference patterns more than celestial mechanics. It was like the entire planet was being measured. Not invaded. Measured. A junior scientist rushed in, nearly tripping over a cable. "We're getting something from the satellites again. It's not a signal, it's everywhere." Before anyone could ask what that meant, the lights dimmed. Not a blackout. A synchronization failure. Every display across the facility, every monitor, every holographic interface, every external feed, flashed at the exact same moment. And then the sky responded. Above Earth, across every visible horizon, the same symbol appeared again. But this time it was closer. Stronger. Heavier. It wasn't projected. It was imposed. The meaning struck every human mind simultaneously. Witness. Ilara staggered slightly, gripping the console edge. It wasn't pain exactly, but a psychological pressure, like standing too close to something far larger than comprehension. "They're not communicating," she whispered. "They're labeling us." "Labeling us as what?" someone asked. She didn't answer, because she didn't want to say it out loud. Observed species. Outside, global panic had fully ignited. News networks replayed orbital footage in loops. Governments issued conflicting statements. Military fleets were put on alert, though no one could define what alert even meant anymore. You couldn't fire at something the size of a continent hanging in orbit. And you couldn't negotiate with something that hadn't acknowledged you as an equal participant in reality. Then the second anomaly arrived. At first it was subtle, just a gravitational irregularity beyond Mars' orbit. Deep space tracking stations flagged it as a minor mass displacement. Then it accelerated. Fast. Too fast. Within minutes, every deep space sensor locked onto the incoming object. It wasn't large compared to the orbital structures, barely a fraction of their scale, but its velocity defied every known constraint. No propulsion plume, no energy trail, no distortion wake. Just motion, like it had always been moving. Toward Earth. A global emergency channel opened instantly across all networks. Object detected on intercept trajectory with inner solar system. Estimated time to Earth orbit, 46 hours. Ilara's stomach tightened. 46 hours was not a warning window. It was a countdown. She zoomed the trajectory data, recalculating manually even as the AI struggled to keep up. It's not random, she said suddenly. What is, her assistant asked. The path, her voice sharpened. It's not heading for Earth. Silence followed. Then she added, it's heading for the ring. Every head in the control room turned back to the sky feeds. The 27 megastructures remained perfectly still. Watching, waiting, as if they had already known this was coming. And then something changed. One of the structures, just one, rotated slightly. Not much, barely measurable. But enough. Its surface geometry shifted, like layers of an impossible shell unlocking. For the first time since their arrival, humanity saw something beneath the exterior. Not machinery, not metal, but depth. A contained horizon of light folding inward, as if space itself was being compressed into a single point. Ilara felt her breath catch. They're preparing, she said. For what? Someone whispered. But no one answered. Because at that exact moment, every sensor tracking the incoming object experienced the same failure. A full-spectrum blackout. All readings stopped. All projections froze. And then in absolute silence, a new reading appeared. It wasn't from Earth systems. It came from the orbital structures. A single data line. Translated instantly into human comprehension. Interception authorized. Ilara looked up at the sky just as the first structure opened completely. And reality itself began to bend. 46 hours collapsed into 45, then 44, but no one in the Ares Deep Observatory was counting normally anymore. Time had stopped feeling like time. It felt like waiting for impact. Every screen on Earth tracked the incoming object as it tore through the inner solar system. Mars had already been crossed without disturbance. Jupiter's gravity fields barely altered its course. It behaved less like a physical body and more like a decision already made. Dr. Ilara Voss stood motionless in front of the central display. The object had no defined silhouette yet, only a growing distortion in space, like reality itself was being stretched toward something invisible. Still no emissions, she asked. A technician shook his head. Nothing, no heat, no radiation, no drive signature. It's like it's not interacting with physics at all. Ilara frowned. Everything interacts with physics. A pause. Not this, the technician admitted. The control room behind her was no longer chaotic. It had become eerily organized. Fear tends to either break systems or stabilize them into ritual. Here, it had done the latter. Every station operator moved with precise efficiency, as if panic had been replaced by mechanical obedience. On the main screen, the orbital ring of megastructures remained unchanged, silent, immense, watching. But Ilara noticed something new. They were no longer evenly passive. Subtle changes had begun. One structure rotated by fractions of a degree. Another adjusted its relative distance. Not random motion, alignment correction, like a machine preparing for calibration. They're reacting to the incoming object, she said. Defensively, someone asked. No, she replied slowly, synchronously. As if all 27 were parts of a single system, finally waking up. Then the object crossed Saturn's orbit. And Earth's sensors finally locked onto it clearly for the first time. What they saw made several analysts physically step back from their consoles. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't an asteroid. It wasn't even a single object. It was a clustered singularity, a mass of compressed structure wrapped in layers of shifting geometry, like something folded repeatedly into itself until physical definition became optional. And it was alive. Not biologically, but purposefully. Every scan returned contradictory results, mass increasing and decreasing at the same time, shape reorganizing faster than imaging resolution, position stabilizing without momentum loss. A scientist whispered, "It's rewriting our measurements as we take them." Ilara's voice was low, "Or it's correcting them." The room fell silent again, because now it was close enough that even amateur telescopes could detect it. News feeds across the world began broadcasting raw sky footage, grainy, unstable, but undeniable. A dark distortion against the stars, growing larger with terrifying certainty. Panic finally broke containment. Cities lit up. Governments issued conflicting evacuation orders that made no logistical sense. Military assets were repositioned, but no one could define a target. There was nothing to aim at. And yet everyone knew. Something was coming. Not to Earth, but through Earth's system. Then the orbital ring reacted. All 27 megastructures shifted at once. Perfect synchronization. No delay, no variance. As if a single consciousness had just given a command. Ilara's breath caught. "They've identified it," she whispered. On the main display, one structure opened fully. Not like a hatch. Not like a door. But like a wound in space being deliberately widened. Inside, there was no machinery. Only pressure. A collapsing region of physics where light bent inward and never returned. And from that impossible depth, a beam formed. Not bright. Not visible in a traditional sense. But absolute. A line where reality ceased to behave normally. The incoming object reacted instantly. For the first time, it changed behavior. It accelerated. Straight toward the source of the beam. "Impact vector confirmed," someone shouted. "It's not avoiding the strike, it's heading into it." Ilara's mind raced. That didn't make sense. No natural object would deliberately enter a containment beam of that magnitude. "Unless it's not trying to survive," she said quietly. The technician looked at her. "Then what is it doing?" Ilara stared at the screen as the distance closed rapidly. "I think it's testing them." A sharp silence hit the room. The beam struck. No explosion followed. No flash. Instead, space simply stopped acknowledging the object's existence along that line of contact. For a fraction of a second, the incoming entity flickered, like a frame skipped in reality itself. And then, it vanished. The entire control room erupted into confusion. Was it destroyed? Did we just lose it? Where did it go? But Ilara didn't speak, because she was watching the orbital ring. And it had gone still. Completely still. Not returning to rest. Not powering down. Just waiting. Then a faint signal appeared on every system across Earth. Not from satellites. Not from ground stations. From the megastructures themselves. A delayed echo. A residue. And within it, something unexpected. A transmission fragment. Ilara isolated it instantly, her fingers moving faster than thought. The signal was fragmented, corrupted, but structured enough to decode. When the translation resolved, her expression changed. Because it wasn't a distress signal. It wasn't a warning. It was a reply. And it was already broadcasting outward. Beyond the solar system. Into deep space. The message had escaped. And whatever had been erased had already been heard. The control room didn't recover from silence this time. It deepened. Because silence, Ilara realized, wasn't the absence of sound anymore. It was the presence of something too large for interpretation. The fragmentary signal kept looping on her console. Broken, corrupted, but undeniably structured. Every time the system tried to clean it, it reassembled itself differently, like it refused to be fully understood by human tools. "Lock it down," she ordered. "Isolate it from all external feeds." "We already did," a technician replied nervously. "It's not coming from outside anymore." Ilara turned sharply. "Explain." He swallowed. "It's self-propagating. It's generating copies of itself across isolated systems. Even air-gapped machines are showing echoes." "That should have been impossible." And yet the data was there. 3 pulses, pause, 3 pulses, then a long gap, then a shift in frequency that didn't correspond to any known electromagnetic spectrum, but still carried information. Ilara leaned closer. "This isn't communication," she whispered. "It's encoding itself into reality." She forced a full reconstruction attempt. The AI hesitated before complying. For a brief moment, the screen went blank. Then coordinates appeared. Not in standard galactic format. Not even in spatial terms, as humanity understood them. They were layered, multi-dimensional references that shifted depending on observation angle. Distance and direction collapsed into something more abstract. "Where does it point?" someone asked. Ilara's fingers moved across the interface, recalculating manually, ignoring warning alerts as the system struggled. Then she froze. "It doesn't point to a place," she said slowly. "It points to an event." A technician frowned. "That doesn't make sense." "It does," she replied, "if whatever sent this doesn't think in locations." She zoomed out the dataset further. Cross-referenced orbital drift, cosmic background radiation shifts, gravitational anomalies. And then it clicked. Her face tightened. "It's not targeting Earth," she said. The room went still. "It's targeting something passing through our region of space." A long pause followed. Then her assistant spoke quietly. "The object that was erased." Ilara nodded. "Wasn't the source," she finished. "It had been a messenger. A probe. A trigger. And now that trigger had fired. Because the coordinates weren't just spatial, they were temporal. They described when something would arrive, not where. And that when was already changing. Ilara watched as the timestamp next to the coordinates began to fluctuate in real time. Seconds shifted forward and backward unpredictably, as if the message itself was trying to avoid being pinned down. "It's unstable," she said. "It's reacting to observation." "Like it knows we're reading it?" someone asked. Ilara didn't answer immediately. Because that was exactly what it felt like. Then every screen in the facility flickered. Not with the previous symbol. Not with warnings. But with something new. A second layer. Superimposed over the signal. And this one was different. Heavier. More deliberate. It didn't say witness. It said, "Intervention DATCTAD." The words weren't translated. They were understood instantly. Ilara felt her stomach tighten. "That's not for us," she said quietly. "No," her assistant agreed. "That's a response." "To what?" No one answered. Because outside the facility, the sky had begun to change again. The orbital megastructures were shifting, not randomly, but in coordinated motion. Entire segments rotated inward toward a central alignment point above Earth's northern hemisphere. They weren't preparing for defense anymore. They were preparing for contact. But not with Earth. With something else. Then one of the structures, larger than the rest, began to open. Not partially. Not cautiously. Completely. Space around it warped like fabric being pulled apart by invisible hands. Light bent inward. Stars behind it disappeared entirely. Inside the opening, there was no machine core. No engine. Only a vast, structured void filled with layered geometry that seemed to extend deeper than physical distance allowed. And from that void, a second signal emerged. But this one wasn't passive. It wasn't a message left behind. It was active, directed, and it wasn't aimed at Earth. It was aimed at the coordinates from the first signal. Ilara's eyes widened. "They're replying," she said. "To what?" someone asked again. But even as the question left the technician's mouth, the answer arrived. On every system, every satellite, every deep space array, a single line of text burned into existence. Not translated, not decoded, just known. The cycle has been triggered. The words lingered for exactly 2.7 seconds. Then vanished. And in that silence, The incoming distortion at the edge of the solar system reappeared. Closer now, faster than before, but altered, as if it had been redirected. Not toward Earth, not toward the ring, but toward the point where both signals intersected. Ilara's breath caught. They didn't erase it, she whispered. They answered it. Outside, the sky over Earth darkened, not from night, but from something far larger passing between the planet and the stars. And for the first time since the structures arrived, the entire orbital ring turned in perfect unison. Toward the same direction. Waiting, cliffhanger, and deep inside the shifting void of the largest megastructure, something began to open that had never opened before. No one in the Ares deep observatory slept anymore. Sleep required the belief that tomorrow would resemble today. That belief was gone. Ilara stood alone in front of the main display, watching the orbital ring remain locked in perfect formation. 27 planet-sized structures, all aligned toward the same region of deep space. Not Earth, not the Sun. Something beyond. Something approaching. The second signal, the one that had reacted to the first, was still active, though no longer broadcasting in bursts. It had stabilized into a continuous low-frequency presence across every system humanity could measure. Not noise, not transmission. A constant awareness. Dr. Voss traced its behavior across the simulation grid. It's not moving randomly, she said quietly. A technician nearby rubbed his eyes. Nothing out there is random anymore. No, she corrected. I mean the signal. It's adjusting in real time like it's tracking something. That made the room tense again. Because tracking implied intent. And intent implied intelligence. Outside, Earth's sky had changed subtly over the last hour. The stars weren't gone, but they were harder to see, as if a thin layer of distortion had been placed between humanity and the universe. A veil, a filter. A boundary. Ilara zoomed in on the outer solar system telemetry. The incoming anomaly had reappeared, closer again, but now its trajectory wasn't straight. It was corrected. Slightly, as if something had nudged it. Guided it. Her stomach tightened. They're not just observing it anymore, she said. They're directing it. A junior analyst looked up sharply. Directing it how? Like steering it. Ilara didn't answer immediately. Because the data didn't support steering in any conventional sense. There were no thrusters acting on the object. No gravitational slingshot effect strong enough to explain the deviation. Yet the path had changed. And the change aligned perfectly with the orbital structure's synchronization pattern. It was like watching a conversation unfold in a language no one had learned to hear properly. Then something unprecedented happened. One of the megastructures emitted a low-energy pulse. Not a weapon discharge. Not a scan. A resonance event. Space around it rippled outward in concentric waves, bending starlight gently but deliberately. Each wave carried information, not encoded in frequency but in structure. Ilara's system flagged it instantly. Gravitational communication, she murmured. That's impossible, someone replied. It shouldn't be possible, she corrected. But it was happening anyway. And as the waves expanded across the solar system, Earth's monitoring systems began to interpret fragments of them automatically. Patterns emerged. Repetition structures. Hierarchical layering. And then meaning. Not words. Not symbols. But intent. A single concept formed across every decoding interface on Earth. Observation continues. Ilara felt a chill run through her. They're not talking to us, she said softly. They're talking about us. The technician hesitated. Who else would they be talking to? Before she could answer, the central display shifted. The incoming anomaly had crossed another threshold, this time near Uranus orbit. And now, for the first time, it was clearly visible even to non-specialized sensors. A shifting structure of compressed geometry, like a folded reality refusing to resolve into a stable form. But something else was wrong. It was no longer alone. Smaller distortions were forming around it. 3, then 5, then more. Alara leaned forward sharply. Are those fragments? Her assistant shook his head. They're not splitting, they're responding. Responding to what? No answer came. Because at that exact moment, the orbital ring reacted again. All 27 megastructures rotated simultaneously. Not toward Earth, not toward the incoming anomaly, but toward something behind it. A region of space that instruments had previously considered empty. Empty was no longer the correct term. Alara's screen filled with sudden static interference. Systems struggled to stabilize. Then, slowly, a structure emerged in the far background of deep space imagery. Not one of the known megastructures. Something different. Smaller, faster, more active. And it was watching the ring. A second fleet. No, Alara corrected herself immediately. Not a fleet. A presence. Because the geometry of the new arrival didn't match any construct pattern humanity had observed so far. It was less structured, more organic in its motion, yet infinitely more coordinated. It didn't enter the system like the first armada. It noticed the system, and that distinction changed everything. A technician whispered, "We're not the only observers." Alara didn't look away from the screen. "No," she said. "We were never the first ones watching." The second presence shifted slightly in deep space, and every orbital megastructure responded with exact synchronization, as if acknowledging a counterpart. A standoff. Between watchers. Between systems. Between intelligences that had never needed humanity to exist until now. And then, the incoming anomaly reached the midpoint between both forces. It stopped. Completely. No deceleration curve. No impact. Just cessation of motion at a point that mathematically should not exist. Ilara's breath caught. "It's here," she whispered. And at that moment, every system on Earth registered a new transmission. Not from either fleet. Not from the anomaly. But from the space between them. A third signal. One that had never been detected before. And it said only one thing. Decision point REACHED. The room went silent. Because for the first time, humanity wasn't being observed. It was being included. And the galaxy had just stopped to listen. The moment the decision point reached, message appeared, every system on Earth stopped behaving like a tool. It started behaving like a participant. At the Ares Deep Observatory, Alara watched as global feeds synchronized without instruction. Military channels, civilian networks, satellite arrays, everything locked into the same frame, as if reality itself had agreed on a single perspective. The anomaly suspended between the two unknown presences remained perfectly still. No drift, no decay, no energy signature that matched any known physical law. Just presence and tension, the kind that doesn't build like a storm, but like something holding its breath. Alara's fingers hovered over her console. "It's not a standoff," she said quietly. "It's a threshold." A technician frowned. A threshold to what? She didn't answer immediately. Because the data had started to change again. The incoming anomaly, once a distorted singular structure, was now showing internal segmentation. Layers within layers, like something was unfolding from inside itself, not physically but conceptually. "It's not an object," she whispered. "It's a transition state." Before anyone could respond, space itself reacted. Not violently. Precisely. A fracture appeared in the region just ahead of the anomaly, not a tear in matter, but in continuity. Light bent inward along edges that had no physical source. Stars behind it elongated unnaturally, as if distance had lost meaning. And then the fracture stabilized. A gate, not constructed, not opened, manifested. Across every sensor on Earth, the same impossible data repeated. No energy input detected. No causal trigger detected. No spatial displacement detected. And yet, it existed. The gate was not a structure in space. It was a condition imposed on space. Ilara took a slow step forward, eyes locked on the screen. From within the gate, something began to emerge. At first, it was only distortion, like a shape refusing to commit to form. Then geometry layered itself into existence, angular, precise, expanding outward in controlled increments. It was smaller than the planet-sized megastructures, but far more active. It didn't drift into position. It arrived already positioned, and it stopped exactly at the midpoint between the anomaly and the orbital ring. The entire Ares control room held its breath. No one spoke. No one moved. Because for the first time since contact began, something had entered the system that did not belong to either known presence. It belonged to neither side. Or perhaps, it belonged to both. Ilara's system attempted classification. It failed immediately. Every predictive model returned contradictions. "Is it another fleet?" someone asked nervously. Ilara shook her head slowly. "No, fleets have structure, hierarchy, this doesn't." "Then what is it?" Her answer came reluctantly. "A response mechanism." The gate expanded slightly, and from within it, a second layer unfolded. Not a ship. Not a weapon. A network. Threads of light stretched outward in every direction, connecting to nothing visible, yet anchoring themselves into the fabric of space like invisible roots. And as those threads stabilized, the orbital megastructures reacted. All 27 rotated simultaneously. Not toward Earth, not toward the gate, but toward the network itself. For the first time, their silence broke in behavior. Not communication. Coordination. The second presence, the distant watchers beyond the anomaly, shifted as well, subtle at first, then more defined, like something adjusting its posture. Ilara felt a cold realization settle in her chest. "They're not reacting to the object anymore," she said. Her assistant looked at her. "Then what are they reacting to?" She stared at the growing structure in the gate. "To the system it belongs to." A pause. Then softly, "We're not seeing first contact anymore." The lights in the control room flickered as gravitational distortions rippled through nearby satellites. Data streams destabilized for a fraction of a second. Then returned. But changed. Every system on Earth now displayed the same symbol layered beneath all telemetry. Not imposed. Not transmitted. Revealed. A new phrase followed. Intervention DATSCTAD. Ilara froze. "This isn't for us," she said quietly. "No," her assistant replied. "It's for everything here." Outside, the gate fully stabilized, and the network inside it extended further until it touched the anomaly. The moment contact occurred, the anomaly reacted. For the first time since entering the solar system, it moved. Not toward Earth, not toward the orbital ring, but toward the gate itself, as if it had been waiting for this exact structure to appear. Ilara's eyes widened. "It recognizes it," she whispered. And then the anomaly did something no system expected. It stopped resisting its own form. It unfolded. Reality bent. Not explosively, but like a concept finally allowed to express itself without restriction. Layers of compressed geometry opened outward, revealing depth where none should exist. And inside that depth, something vast stirred. The control room went silent again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was comprehension without understanding. Because the anomaly wasn't an object. It was a signal carrier. A vessel, and whatever it carried, had just found the gate it was looking for. Ilara whispered, almost to herself. "We didn't intercept it. We interrupted its arrival." And the gate responded. Not with sound, not with light, but with expansion. Slow, deliberate, final. The gate didn't grow like an explosion. It grew like inevitability. Slow, unstoppable, certain. At the Ares Deep Observatory, every console flickered under the strain of overlapping gravitational signatures. The air itself felt wrong, heavier in some places, lighter in others, as if space inside the room had stopped agreeing with itself. Ilara Voss stood frozen in front of the central display. The anomaly had fully unfolded now. Not as a ship, not as an entity, but as a layered structure of controlled distortion, revealing internal geometry that shifted every time it was observed directly. And inside it, something vast remained partially concealed, like an idea too large to fully exist at once. The gate opposite it stabilized completely. Between them, the orbital megastructures held formation. 27 planet-sized constructs. And for the first time since their arrival, they were no longer silent in behavior alone. They were waiting in sequence. Ilara whispered, "This isn't contact." A technician replied without looking away from the feed, "Then what is it?" She hesitated, then answered, "It's alignment." Across the solar system, gravitational readings spiked in synchronized pulses. Satellites drifted slightly off their predicted paths, not damaged, redirected, as if something had begun rewriting local space dynamics with permission rather than force. Then the gate emitted a pulse. Not energy. Information. Every system on Earth received it instantly. Civilian devices, military networks, isolated scientific instruments. All of them displayed the same interface. Not built. Not transmitted. Manifested. A choice structure. 2 symbols. One matched the orbital ring. One matched the gate anomaly system. No explanation, no translation, no context. Just decision architecture. Ilara felt her stomach tighten. "This is it," she said quietly. Her assistant looked at her. "It's what?" "The point they've been moving toward since the first object appeared." The room behind her was silent now. Even alarms had stopped sounding, not because danger had passed, but because the systems themselves had stopped treating it as an emergency. It had become procedural. Global networks stabilized into unified feed streams. Governments attempted communication protocols, but received only mirrored versions of the same interface. The choice was everywhere. No escape. No delay. Only selection. Outside the observatory, the sky had changed again. The orbital megastructures were no longer simply aligned. They were restructuring their relative positions into a lattice pattern, interlocking gravitational fields forming something that resembled a containment geometry on a solar scale. But containment of what was unclear. Ilara zoomed into the anomaly. It was responding. Subtle shifts, internal reorganization, not retreating. Preparing, as if it had been waiting for the decision interface to appear before completing its own transformation. "Neither side is acting like this is new to them," she said slowly. Her assistant swallowed. "You think they've done this before?" Ilara didn't answer immediately, because the data implied something worse than repetition. It implied familiarity. Like a cycle. Then every screen in the observatory flickered again. The interface changed. A third layer appeared beneath the choice. Hidden until now. A single line of text. Not translated. Understood directly. Observation required for resolution. Ilara stepped back slightly. "That's not a choice," she said quietly. "That's a condition." A technician's voice cracked. "A condition for what?" But no answer came from the systems. Because at that exact moment, the orbital megastructures activated simultaneously. Not weapons. Not shields. Something deeper. The entire ring emitted synchronized gravitational pulses that intersected at the gate's boundary. Space folded inward along those intersections, forming a stable boundary field that enclosed the anomaly, the gate, and the surrounding space in a single unified region. A controlled zone. Ilara's eyes widened. "They're isolating it," she said. "Isolating what?" someone asked. She didn't respond, because the anomaly had just changed again. Its internal structure collapsed inward, not destructively, but intentionally. Layers compressed into a single focal point. And from that point, a signal burst outward, stronger than before, directed, focused, and it didn't target Earth. It targeted the lattice formed by the orbital structures. The moment it hit, all 27 megastructures responded. Instantly, perfectly, without hesitation. Alara stepped forward. They've been waiting for that signal. Her assistant turned sharply, waiting for it. Yes, she said, voice tight, because this isn't the first time it's been sent. Silence fell. Outside, gravitational waves intensified. The containment lattice tightened. The gate expanded slightly in response, not resisting but adapting. Then something impossible happened. The interface on every system changed again. The two choices disappeared, replaced by one word: decide. And beneath it, coordinates, not spatial, not temporal, but local. Earth. Ilara's breath caught. It's not asking the galaxy anymore, she whispered. It's asking us. The control room froze. Because for the first time, humanity wasn't observing the event from a distance. It was inside its decision structure. And every satellite, every station, every system on Earth began transmitting the same status update. Input required. Ilara looked up at the sky. The orbital megastructures were perfectly still now. The gate was stable. The anomaly was focused. And something beyond all of it was waiting. She stepped toward the console. Her hand hovered over the interface. Not because she understood, but because she realized something simple and terrifying. Whatever choice she made was already part of the system that created the choice itself. The moment Alara's finger made contact with the interface, the universe did not explode, flash, or collapse. It reorganized. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then every system on Earth went blank for exactly 1.3 seconds. No satellites, no feeds, no signals, no noise. Just absence. And in that absence, humanity understood something without being told. The decision had been accepted. When vision returned, the sky above Earth had changed. The orbital megastructures were no longer in a defensive lattice. They had reconfigured into a structured arc, an immense, deliberate formation spanning half the planet's horizon at any given time, not enclosing Earth anymore. Framing it, like something had been placed inside a boundary, designed not to contain it, but to define it. Ilara stood motionless in the Ares' deep observatory. The room was silent, but not empty. Every console flickered with low, steady readings that no longer signaled alarm or uncertainty. They signaled status. Stable, confirmed, integrated. Her assistant broke the silence first. What just happened? Ilara didn't answer immediately. Her eyes were fixed on the anomaly. It was changing. Not violently, not rapidly, but fundamentally. The layered distortion that had once seemed like compressed geometry was now stabilizing into a coherent structure. For the first time since its arrival, it had a definable edge, not because it became simpler, but because reality around it had adapted to interpret it. And the gate opposite it was closing, slowly, not sealing, not collapsing, resolving. Between the two systems, the gravitational lattice emitted one final synchronized pulse. It passed through the anomaly, through the gate, through the orbital structures, and through Earth. No destruction followed. No impact. Only understanding. Every human mind registered the same sensation at once, not as words, but as realization. This was not an invasion. Not a war. Not even first contact. It was classification. Ilara stepped forward slowly. They weren't watching us, she said quietly, not the way we thought. Her assistant frowned. Then what were they doing? Ilara looked at the sky. They were determining what we are allowed to become. Outside, the orbital megastructures began to drift outward slightly, widening their formation, not leaving Earth's orbit, but expanding its boundary presence, as if redefining the system's perimeter. The gate fully stabilized one last time, then shut, not with force, with finality. The anomaly, once an incomprehensible structure, contracted inward, collapsing layer by layer until it became a single stable point of reference. And then, it stopped moving. Completely. Alara felt a strange emptiness settle in her chest. "It's over," someone whispered. But Alara didn't believe that, because nothing this vast ever simply ended. She zoomed out the final system map. The solar system was now different. Not physically, structurally. Earth was no longer simply a planet orbiting a star. It was now enclosed within a broader configuration of megastructural observation points, each one aligned not toward Earth itself, but toward the space beyond it. As if Earth had been repositioned into a viewing axis. A perspective point. A monitored origin. The orbital structures no longer felt like an occupying force. They felt like infrastructure. And infrastructure implied purpose. Alara finally spoke again, voice low. "They didn't come here to judge us." The room remained silent. "They came here to place us." Her assistant swallowed. "Place us where?" Alara looked at the last remaining active signal, a faint residual transmission still looping through deep space. It was no longer expanding outward. It was returning, slowly, from somewhere beyond the solar system, or beyond comprehension. And now, for the first time since contact began, the orbital megastructures responded to it not with defense or alignment, but with recognition. Ilara's breath caught. "They're not finished," she said, because now she understood. This was not a single event. It was a transition phase in something far larger. A system recalibrating itself with Earth included. The sky outside the observatory darkened slightly, not from nightfall, but from something passing at the edge of perception. Something vast, distant, and aware. And then the final message appeared. Not on screens, not on satellites, but directly in shared human understanding. A simple continuation. Not a warning. Not a command. Just context. Observation continues. Alara stood beneath the alien sky, watching the orbital megastructures settle into their final configuration. No longer enclosing. No longer attacking. No longer waiting. Just watching. And far beyond the solar system, something ancient shifted its attention again. Because Earth had not been contacted. It had been recorded. And now it had been filed among the things that would not be ignored again.